I always approach a contract as this way. We're going to do one, what's required of contract and fulfill the obligation so there's no issue to even look at the contract again, other than my payment terms. There's a couple of things you always need to pay attention to, at least we do. One, we look at indemnification clauses. The other thing is look at your financial terms. How do you get paid? When you get paid? How often you get paid? Those are key and those are negotiable. I talk to a lot of small businesses and they're saying, well, how do I do what you do? It's like, it's not about what I do.
Yeah,
What do
what
you
do
do
you do?
well?
Yeah.
And do that first.
I heard money don't grow on trees, but I still believe I can achieve. Cause cash rules everything around me, around me, around me, around me. Money don't grow on trees, but I still believe.
Welcome to another episode of the Black Money Tree podcast, where we're helping you to build wealth so that you can build your community. Now, as you know, if you've been following the Black Money Tree, we believe that it takes money to build our communities, and the most important thing that we can do to build our communities and our wealth is to build strong businesses. But a strong business has to have a strong foundation. And today's guest is someone that is doing some amazing things in business. And one of the things that I've been really impressed about is the way he structures his organization and has systems and strategies. It's not just a hustle with him. He's doing some big things, and I've been very impressed. So we have Mr. Spurgeon Robinson, who is the CEO of Impact Strategic Consulting. Spurgeon, welcome to the Black Money Tree podcast.
Once again, thank you. Appreciate it as well. Exciting for us to also tell us about our business and our business model and how things can grow, and particularly in the Black community as well.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. So glad to be a part of it.
Now, let's start right there. Now, and I would like to say, one of the things that I've often told people, some people will say, oh, you're Black Expo. I'm Black. You're going to do business with me, And I say, I'm not going to do business with you because you're Black.
Right.
I'm going to do business with you because you have a quality product or service at an affordable price. I'm going to open the door and I'm going to root for you because you're Black. But I ain't going to do business with you Black. So I want to say you do a lot of business with a lot of larger entities and organizations, and you're way beyond just doing business with Black people. So talk a little bit about that. And do you see many of our business kind of limiting themselves by just focusing on the Black community? Or what are some of the, I view you more as a somewhat of a business expert in terms of structure. So tell me some of the things that you're seeing that's stopping small businesses.
So I'll take it in two forms. We do a lot of work in the public sector as well. So we work with a lot of state, local governments and federal governments. So in that space, it's hard to define being just working with Black, businesses that actually recruit and will hire us as well. So it's really, we have to be very dynamic in what we do and very well in what we do. And because that's the only way that we actually garner additional work is by the performance of what we do. So it's important. As far as working with other Black entities and businesses as we grow, we don't focus on, hey, it's a Black firm, we got to work with them. However, I think it is important in our community that we do open doors for Black businesses to be successful. And with that, we are channeling like how whatever resources we subcontract, for example, in our world, we call it subcontracting. We try to see, one, who is best qualified to do this type of work, what relationships they already have. And if it happens to be a Black-owned business, it's great. But we actually try to make sure that we're building something in our whole community by the staff we have, the team we have, that reflects quality of whatever we do. And I think that's the most important thing that's going to continue to sustain us as well.
So before we go any further, because I do have a question, I want to ask you about certifications and contracts and things of that nature, but explain exactly what Impact Strategic Consulting is and what you guys do.
Right. So Impact Strategic Consulting is a diversified consulting and advisory services firm. And it's a big MBA-ish term or consulting term, but essentially we focus in four areas. One is emergency management and disaster recovery. So our firm is very niche in the sense that we help state and local governments and the federal government to help communities respond and recover from these devastating events. So if you're in Houston, like Hurricane Harvey, recently Hurricane Beryl, if you're in Florida, recently with Hurricanes Milton and Helene, those things are examples. You're in New York City with Hurricane Sandy. So we help, whether it's a fire, whether it's a flood, whether it's a hurricane, tornadic event, etc. We help communities recover from that. So we help manage that process, if you could, for these different state and local governments. That's one thing. The other thing is we have a very strong compliance arm. which helps enables those that are under federal guidelines or state and local guidelines and compliance to actually make sure that they are following the rules associated with funding that they may receive. They were doing things such as labor management, workforce development, all those different things that comply, as we call it, compliance to those grant requirements. We're making sure they're following those rules as well. Then third aspect of what we do is we have a niche group that actually does a lot of human and health services, and so we help entities that are dealing with, it could be migrant populations, those asylum seekers, and other entities. We do a lot of case management in that area as well. So a very strategic part of it. And last is our business, what we call strategy. So it's just different things that we're able to do because of the uniqueness of our team to be able to adapt, pivot, understand the business models, how things work, and actually take them from a certain state to a more perfected state. And we actually do it from just our business strategy portfolio. So that's what Impact Strategic Consulting is. We've been around 17 years, going on our 18th year now, and have really built a business, a small business, as we want, if we want to, capture as such. But we're a business that continues to grow and continue to build resources and continue to elevate people's ability to do great things.
Now, this seems somewhat niche specific. I don't think someone just jumps out and says, I'm going to do disaster recovery. So walk me through, how did you get into this business? Everybody knows consulting, but was it straight out of college, or what was the progression to this business?
Yeah, and it was another thing I know you mentioned was certification. So I want to forget about that. So certifications, just to go back to that, is important in the sense that it validates where we are able to do business and work in, right? It's not the end all be all, but it helps us to be able to provide a competent resource to state and local governments that, hey, yes, we can do this real work. And guess what? Because we're trying to build the base of minority business participation, guess what? We're a credible firm that can do that. And so certifications are great, and we're certified in like 18 different states, et cetera, to do that. Kind of includes state of Texas. Now, as a niche business, we initially started with Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, wow.
So helping families to get housed that were transitioning from the Superdome. Everybody knows back in the day when everyone was just captured into the Superdome, nowhere to go in New Orleans, it was completely shut down, to now to them transitioning to the Astrodome at that time in Houston, which was the last time it was actually used for something, and helping them get housing in the area. And so 25,000 families were displaced from New Orleans that we facilitated and helped them to get rehoused. So that's kind of got my first foray into, hey, what's emergency management? What's disaster recovery? How do you help and case manage families and individuals into a completely new environment and a new place to live, not only in Houston, but other cities throughout the country, and facilitate providing them with housing and stability until they were able to get back on their feet and eventually, as we know, move back to their homes in New Orleans as that recovery effort was.
So were you doing that? You say that was your first experience with it. Was on your own? Or you were with someone else?
Initially I was on my own as a consultant. I was my own firm. That's when I started. And then I was working with a huge team, and it was led by the Harris County Housing Authority, as well as another firm called MFR, and also McConnell Jones, which is MJLM. So McConnell Jones, Lanier Murphy, they actually were part of the teams that helped build this program for Harris County and the surrounding area. So it was a great endeavor, first time it ever been done. And so we learned a lot from it. So it was one of those things that allowed us to then go and help the citizens in New Orleans, and actually have a team that actually went to New Orleans and also built the same model. So emergency management, disaster recovery, these hurricane responses from a mom and pop kind of industry, really where it was after Katrina, to something that now has grown into a very sophisticated, organized effort in which now we're able to respond and find different ways to continue to improve how we respond to these large-scale disasters. Well, we're part of the initial evolution as well.
So your clients are very niche specific. Government entities.
Government, and that's big. You know, they do a lot of government.
You only need one or two.
No, I wouldn't say that. You need a lot.
But,
because it's such not only just a competitive environment, the RFP process is how
Yeah.
we secure our business, relationship building as well. But you got to be able to articulate in written form, literally, what you do and how well you do it. And there are a number of bigger, larger firms that do the work we do. We'd be able to compete against them and also be successful and sometimes win in work. But we team a lot with these larger firms as well. But the government, and I say when I say government, it's federal, state, and local, needs capacity. They need help and the assistance in different areas. And so, you have to be very diligent about how you approach government because it's not like private sector. It's not like you can walk to a oil and gas company and say, "Hey, we can do X and this right contract," and you're off and
Yeah.
running. We have to be able to go through the procurement process and be able to, like I said, write how well we are and what we do, and the subject matter experts we have on our team to get this type of business. So it's something that I tell a lot of people who want to get into government contracting is that there's a lot of things I's dot and T's to cross before you really get in. But once you're in and you know how to manage that process, it's very rewarding. But for a lot of people, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a
Yeah.
lot of certifications. It's a lot of information. One thing people don't understand about the government, everything in all your business is transparent to the public.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the public knows everything about what you do and how you do it to a certain degree, to a large scale. And you just have to understand that's part of, the business is that, this transparency in government work.
So you said it's a lot of I's to dot, T's to cross in order to get in it.
Hmm.
What are some of the most prevalent I's and T's that are missed by a lot of the businesses that are trying to get into this
Yeah.
sector that you're seeing
Hmm.
because you do consulting as well. So
Yeah.
what are some of the most prevalent things that are missed that people
Right.
should be doing to get into these environments?
So organization is key. And I say that meaning that you need to have an organization, right? That understands your financial, um, your accounting and your finances need to be up to snuff. And then you hate to use
Yeah.
the term, but you really need to have it where um, you have a proper accounting system. You have to have a financial management system. You understand your P&L, your balance sheet, because also in the public sector, you have to actually sometimes present that information to the buyer. So you have to have the confidence that one, you can stay in business, you can fund the project itself, because sometimes you're having a 30, 60, 90-day payment cycle with the government agency, and sometimes a year. We went over 2 years sometimes without getting paid, and be able to have that. So your financial management is so key and critical. I tell people the other thing that you need to really have besides a really strong financial operation is a legal expert, because you have contracts coming from the government pretty thick, pretty one-sided, and you need to be able to interpret what that means to you, what your obligations are a part of that contract, and so that one, timely payments, but two, you're doing the scope of work the right way, and there's no way that they can hold money or anything back from you. So understand your contractual obligations from a legal perspective is very important. And at the end of the day, you need to perform. And when we find that entities are not successful, it's because they're not meeting the performance criteria they have. Then it flows into not being able to invoice correctly to get your payment.
Yeah.
And then it flows back to then not having the cash management then to sustain operations.
Yeah.
So those are things that are very important. A lot of these entities can't just pay you.
Yeah.
They have to have a valid invoice that's accurate, that has the right information on it. It's very detailed. You and I worked on a project, and one of the things that we were always consistent about is, hey, document what you did
Yeah.
so that you can justify the payment from the government. Because some auditor is going to come back and say, why did you pay X, Y, and Z this amount of money? And there's a story behind it. And you have to have it documented. Otherwise, they just believe that you're just writing checks and just sending money
Yeah.
out. And I say they don't believe it. It's just the process, right? And so you have to have the ability to understand, when I come back to transparency, is that multiple eyes are going to be looking at government contracts and how they're being procured and how you're making the payment. So it's very important to anybody getting into government contracting. make sure that you are documenting what you do every day, how you do it, and it fits in the scope of work that you're actually billing the client for.
Yeah.
So
Talk
focus
about
on-
the legal part because, you know, like you said, we worked on the project that we worked on,
Mhm.
the county here.
Yep.
I'll be honest with you, they sent me that big old
Yeah.
document
You
as
just
well.
signed it.
Yeah, it was kind of
Just
like,
signed it.
what can I really do?
Right,
You know,
right, right.
am I really going to be able to push back on
Right.
it? Is there any adjustment?
Yeah.
And when you're talking the size
Yeah.
of millions of dollars,
Yes.
it's kind of like, well, we'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
right.
You know, type of thing.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you employ the attorney to
Mhm.
just interpret it so you're clear that you don't step
Yeah.
on any landmines, not necessarily to negotiate on your behalf. Is that
No,
correct?
twofold. And believe it or not, there are parameters you can negotiate in every contract. Contract's agreement, and both you have to be able to satisfy. And yeah, there are stipulations in government contract that you just never. I mean, it's not worth your time to kind of,
Yeah.
blow back. I always approach a contract as this way. We're going to do one, what's required of contract and fulfill the obligation so there's no issue to even look at the contract again, other than my payment terms, et
Yeah,
cetera.
yeah.
But those are things that you can negotiate and look at. My attorney, and I contract our legal services, so I don't have an in-house attorney. We think it's more beneficial because we don't have legal stuff that comes through every day,
Yeah.
and contracts come up. They're not so different, but there's some key things. So there's a couple of things you always need to pay attention to, at least we do. One, we look at indemnification clauses. You got to look at that because you could be held liable for anything and everything. And if you don't come back with some mutual indemnification, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble if somebody else does something and has nothing to do with you. So I tell people, look at your indemnification clauses. That's key. The other thing is look at your financial terms. How do you get paid? When you get paid? How often you get paid? Those are key and those are negotiable. You can tell the entity, hey, I need to be paid monthly within 30 days of a valid invoice. They'll come back with terms of 60 days and 90 days. And you say, no, I need to be paid faster than that. So those are things that are negotiable, but if you don't negotiate them, they'll never happen. Insurance clauses, depending on the type of work you're doing, sometimes we work for a lot of construction firms, and they will have their contract, their standard template is geared toward construction firms. Well, we're not really doing construction. So we make those clauses mutual in the sense that for the type of work we're doing, what the risk should be involved with. There's no reason why you should have a $10 million umbrella, $50 million umbrella, and you're doing $1 million job and you had nothing to do with construction. You might be just doing the compliance piece. So those kind of things we look at in the club. So your contracts, they're coming from the government. They're pretty thick.
Yeah.
They're hard to change because they got to go commissioner's court and other legal people they have that are sometimes get it approved. But there are things in there that are reasonable that you should always look at, have an attorney look at. And one, so you understand what your obligations are on that contract. But two, there are things you can actually negotiate to benefit. And I would look at payment terms because you want to make sure you get paid as fast as possible, no matter what. And then there's no holdback of, if you can negotiate that in as well. And then making sure that the indemnification clause are mutual as well so you don't get jammed up.
So what do you do from the perspective of, I'm just going back to my experience, we had payment terms,
Right.
but there was a period where they transitioned between the buckets of money. I believe it was CARES Act to ARPA money,
something like that, yeah.
and we went almost 6 to 8 weeks without getting paid. Now, for us, our saving grace was simply we didn't have the capacity to front that level of money.
No.
But all of the restaurants in our program knew you get paid when we get paid.
That's true.
That was pretty much what was in our agreement.
Right.
And for the most part, 2-3 weeks that worked.
Yeah.
But when it got to 6 to 8 weeks,
yeah,
it became a problem.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we really didn't feel like we had any recourse because at the end of the day, we know they could have hired someone else for the contract. So we're happy we got it. We don't want to raise too many waves. They were kind enough. The county was there. They were awesome. They wrote us a letter and said, this is our fault, not theirs. And we were able to weather that storm. But in a situation like that,
Right.
what really can you do?
Yeah. So, and it's difficult because you want to keep a client. You don't
Yeah.
want them to always think that you're not can't fund your operations as
Yeah.
well. So that's why I say it's always great to have. Another thing you should always have is a great banking relationship as
Yeah.
possible. And a line of credit is not a bad thing, because that's actually a great thing. It helps you sustain you when you have these other things that you got to buffer for as well. But when it does happen, it's back to the conversations we have with the client. Say, look, we submit an invoice in a timely manner. Our payment terms are X, Y, and Z. Can you actually expedite this payment, or why is our payment being held up? And other than a reasonable clause of, hey, your invoice was incorrect, which I'll tell you back to make sure your invoices are correct and documented correctly, or some other things, then they should pay you on time.
Yeah.
But, it's, when it gets egregious,
Yeah.
you never want to turn to legal arm. It's really about conversation and relationships
Yeah.
you have. And I think that always just have a conversation about, hey, at some point in time, small businesses really thrive on getting paid within 30 days, 60 days max. When you start getting outside of that, but any business, it can become a struggle, but
Yeah.
especially for a small business as well. And people understand that. So I would say great banking relationships help to kind of mind that as well. But once you get paid, you want to make sure that you meet all your obligations as well. But getting that invoice right is really key,
Yeah.
because if there's no issues with it, it should flow
Yeah.
through.
Now, when you say right, what is right? I assume
Yeah.
they give you a layout. I know for
Mhm.
us, it was a food program, so we
Mhm.
had to list like the date of the
What?
food, what the
Yep.
restaurant, how many the people,
Mhm.
and I believe we also gave you guys a whole nother spreadsheet that listed the actual client, the date, the time, the
Probably all
meal,
that. Yeah.
all of that stuff.
All that. So it
Yeah.
gets back to the detail of what the uh, federal government wants to see in transparency. Because at
Okay.
some point in time, an outside auditor will look at them and say, okay, why did you make this payment? And the more that you can detail about this payment is done because it was happened on this day, this person served this many meals to this kind, and this is why, and that was the amount. Easy way to path to follow. And that's why documentation is so key. But when you look back at your contract and once again gets understand what is your invoice requirements. That's why when you look at that document and you look at an agreement, say, what are my requirements for an invoice? If it tells me I need to identify by line item how many X, Y, and Z I paid times the rate, etc., it equals X, that's what you need to produce.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets back to. And if you've done that correctly, typically, like I said, you should have no holdback or hold up on it. Now, if somebody looks at something and there's something on there that's questionable, here's the problem. You can have a line item that's $100 holding up a $10,000 invoice.
Yeah.
And that really gets you like, come on, can you just pay then the $9,900
Yeah.
dealer? So, and sometimes the government doesn't work that way. They'll kick back the whole invoice. You got to fix it and submit it, and your clock starts again.
Yeah.
So those kind of things you got to be careful of. That's why I say it's good to do some quality control review of those invoices before they go out. We do that with almost a 3-step process. Where our accounting team will process an invoice standard, then the project manager looks at it, make sure it's right, and then we have another QA/QC person that looks at it before it goes out, so that we can get it right. And even then, and as often as we've done this in these programs, we still get invoices kicked back.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just clarifications. Sometimes it's some, whoever's looking at it interprets what you wrote differently than reality.
Yeah.
It happens. So I always tell people, try getting your invoice as quick as possible. Make sure it's as accurate as possible. And then hopefully you can get turned around pretty quickly as well.
Now, I was speaking to one of the commissioners, and one of the things that he shared was that the biggest issue from small businesses being able to do business with the county is payment terms. And he specifically mentioned bonding. So
yeah,
explain for those that don't know what bonding
Yeah.
is and give a few tips on building your bonding capacity.
Right. So this is a little bit stretcher out of my area because bonding typically falls in construction realm.
Okay.
And we don't do a lot of, and our firm is not required to do bonding. However, we've looked into it because we're looking at construction. So in construction and bonding, I'm going to get very, this is a one-on-one level kind of basis of what I understand about bonding. So don't take all this for fact. But bonding is based on the capacity you almost insure yourself from a cash perspective that anything goes wrong, you can cover and pay. All right. So it looks at all your assets and everything. So that if something happens, you can bond up to a certain capacity of your assets. And there is a surety bonding group that actually helps to define what that level is so that people can go out and get bonding for a certain project. And you can bond only up to the amount that the surety company agrees to, and it's per project. So in other words, if you have a $100,000 bond and you have two projects for 200,000, you can't say here I got 100 here and 100 here. The total's 100.
Yeah.
So you only can bond up to the $100,000, et cetera. That's just a quick example. And so some of the aspects of it is one, the liquidity, because you're tied up your bonding in a certain project. So it's hard to get another project because you don't have bonding capacity.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that, then that kind of stonewalls you, right? Until you can finish that project or release some of that bonding amount for the current one that you may be completing. The other aspect is assets. Everything that, is a quote unquote liquid asset in particular, but anything hard assets that allows you to get to that level is like your house. If you have a $500,000 house, you have a bonding capacity up to $500,000 because guess what? The house is worth that. Outside of that, you don't have that bonding capacity. You don't have those assets to actually protect it. So that's what the bonding capacity, the bonding firm looks at, and that's what your bonding capacity is. The problem, I shouldn't say it's a problem. Yeah, it's a problem in Houston is that historically, and it may have changed recently, there is no large construction firm that can bond a large sum of money. So we're depending on either the larger firms who are more established to go get these bigger projects now, because everything's more expensive too, by the way, so that because they can bond it. And that's what's really holding back some of the minority communities in being able to bond these large projects. There's some programs out there that will help with bonding assistance. There's some government entities that will guarantee the bonding for a firm. Those are very proactive states and cities that are doing that. So, but like I said, I'm not the professional in that as well, but from the conversations I've had around bonding, it's really been the fact that nobody locally owned firms have large bonding capacities. And by large, I mean over the 10 million-ish kind of range where you can really have an opportunity to really build something.
So you didn't say this, but I'm gonna say it, and you tell me if what I'm saying is correct. Pretty much, if you're starting out, you probably shouldn't be looking at a government contract. You need to build to that level.
So you need to have demonstrated a track record of 2 or 3 years in business. That's almost for any entity.
Yeah, any bank.
But it's easier for I'll say it, a private sector company to hire you. And that's how I started off too. Private sector company hired me to do some work and I was on retainer for a certain fee. Now, they were literally hiring me. I'm doing the work, et cetera, time hourly rate, and I get the money. For the government, because you are competing and putting in proposal for a certain amount of money, they want to see a track record that you have been in business. And it doesn't mean long. It could be a year, it could be 2, but they need to see a track record you've been in business. But it also would dictate the size of the award you get too. There's flexibility under $25,000 and $50,000 that people can give entities opportunities to start on a project, but after that, you have to go to the procurement process. And the procurement process often requires 2 or 3 years of past financial history. So you got to kind of be able to show that.
Yeah, I got you.
And so it just becomes one of those gating factors that, can you build your business through the private sector or just small contracting and then be able to get larger contracts through the federal government or through the state and local government. So it's a trick to it.
Talk a little bit about politics that goes along with it. I mean, do you really, like sometimes, I'm going to speak for some small business owners, you feel like I don't even really have a seat at the table because maybe I didn't donate enough to the right campaign or I don't know the right people.
Yeah.
And if you answer this the best way you can, is the playing field really level? If I have the bonding capacity, I have the skill set, and I submit my RFP right next to 10 other RFPs that may or may not have donated to certain campaigns, do I really have a shot?
So the short answer is going to be yes. The reality of all this, and it doesn't matter if you're in the public sector, athletic, or the private sector, it's relationships.
Relationships, yeah.
They got to know who you are. And if I dropped an RFP into an entity that had no history of who I am, never heard of me, yeah, my stuff could be pretty nice, but like, who are they? And versus someone who has visited them, come to the office and talked about scope, maybe done another project with them before, there's a little more confidence that this person understands. Now, but also you could be in we're in unique situations where we've never worked with entity before, but because of what we did, had a certain expertise. In other words, we've done it somewhere else where, well, and we can come into a new organization and say, okay, they've done it before. But once again, that's a past performance that I've gotten because I've worked in this industry for 10 years and I understand it. But I tell people I hesitate from political contributions a lot, although we've done it, don't get me wrong. Um, I think it really comes down to the work that you do.
Yeah.
And from there, and I think from the work you do, then there's ability to help others along the way. And we understand politics is also people have to raise money.
Yeah.
Simple as that. We don't shy away from that fact of that, but we don't lean into that as, hey, by the way, since I loan, it's not loan, Lord.
I wish
Since
it was
I
long.
wish it was
Yeah.
long, I can write it off. So, and by the way, you can't write it off. So
Yeah.
think about that. But if you contribute to a campaign, hey, I deserve X, Y, and Z. That's really not how we look at it. We look at it because we think you're doing the right thing in the community to build this community, and we want to be able to support you, and you support them financially as well. So those are the kind of things that we look into. Um, we don't, or I even personally don't contribute enough money to me to make a difference to somebody.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people who contribute way more than we do, and that's good for them. What we do is we are very strategic about. I mean, I live in this community, in particular in Houston, Harris County, Fort Bend County, and the 5 county surrounding areas in state of Texas. So it's important to me to help people who I think are going to benefit or whatever we think that is important to do well.
Yeah.
And we understand politics has money behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. You have contracts in other states as well, right?
Yes. So we are a multi-state vendor. We work everywhere from as far as New Hampshire now, all the way into Vermont to New York, Puerto Rico. We've done work in California, Texas, obviously, because we're here, Louisiana, North Carolina, Tennessee. So a number of different places we work, so multiple states. So other thing too, you work in these states and you work for the public sector, pay your taxes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them. And that's where the accounting piece of it becomes so important because depending on how expansive your geography is as well. But I tell any small business, and the one thing I think I struggle with small businesses more than anything when I talk to them about, find what you do and do it well first. Perfect that business model before you go reach into something else. It's so many times I see people, I can do that too. Oh, I can do that too. Focus on perfecting what you do well initially.
Yeah.
And then you can expand to different areas. We started emergency management disaster recovery. That's all we did. Yeah. That's all we did. And we perfected that to the point where we were asked to do other things that were tangential to it, like our compliance project. It's like, can you have oversight screen? Yeah, it was a contingent on us being able to do our work well in the emergency management space. And then, it kind of morphed into other things. So, but I talk to a lot of small businesses and they're saying, well, how do I do what you do? It's like, it's not about what I do.
Yeah.
What do you do well?
Yeah.
And do that first and do it well, get that business model perfected, and then you can expand to other things that you'll be able to do. And you build a track record, a relationship with folks that can trust you to move forward as well.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. So.
Well, Spurgeon, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to share? What's on horizon for Impact, or what else you got going on?
I think it's important that we always look for good people. Yeah. As we continue to build our brand, we want to be able to kind of serve our communities as well. We are in a very niche area of emergency management disaster recovery, so it goes inside people. So there's a lot of work out there, but there's also a lot of competitors, and so we just try to do what we do well. We try to make sure we maintain the quality of work we do as well. Those are things that's going to sustain us long term. But we also invest in new technologies. AI, we're looking at how it impacts the work that we do. We recently purchased a software company that focuses on public housing authorities and state and local governments and dealing with the homeless community, as well as housing initiatives around the country, mental health, mental awareness, mental health. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to pivot to in a sense, or be an offshoot of the work we've done currently. So those are the kind of things we're looking forward to, and those kind of things we're going to build. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Spurgeon.
appreciate you as
All
well.
right.
Thanks for inviting
And
me on.
thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Black Money Tree Podcast. And make sure you come out to Texas Black Expo's 2025 Summer Celebration. Our theme is Connecting for Contracts. We're bringing together small businesses, government entities, larger corporations to help you get a leg up on getting some of these lucrative contracts. So if you haven't already, go to our website, texasblackexpo.com, sign up for our mailing list, and make sure you follow us on our social media outlets. Thank you so much for tuning in.